We'll just hear a verse that makes a nice complete morning program. As I said yesterday, if you take a little time to chant and hear something from the Bhagavad Gītā, it can be very helpful in making a foundation for your day. So I'm opening my Bhagavad Gītā app, and I'm opening to chapter 2, and I'm going to read a verse where Krishna starts instructing Arjuna, who's been through a lot. Arjuna went through a lot. He was about to enter into the battle, and then he felt overwhelmed by the situation. And in some editions of the Bhagavad Gītā, the first chapter is called the Yoga of Despair. Amazing, isn't it? The Yoga of Despair. And there's a way in which when we come into frustration or despair, there's a great opportunity for us to turn off our own false ego, not try to figure out how to fix the situation, but turn to Krishna. And then not only when we're in despair or frustrated, but we start to realize that if we take higher direction from Krishna through the Bhagavad Gītā, then whatever steps we take in this world, any direction we're going, we can be assured that we're under the protection of the divine nature. So at 2:14, Krishna gives this advice. O son of Kunti, name of Arjuna, the non-permanent appearance of happiness and distress and their disappearance in due course are like the appearance and disappearance of winter and summer seasons. They arise from sense perception, O scion of Bharat, and one must learn to tolerate them without being disturbed. And here's Prabhupada's purport. In the proper discharge of duty, one has to learn to tolerate non-permanent appearances and disappearances of happiness and distress. According to Vedic injunction, one has to take his bath early in the morning, even during the month of Magh, January, February. It is very cold at that time, but in spite of that, a man who abides by the religious principles does not hesitate to take his bath. Similarly, a woman does not hesitate to cook in the kitchen in the months of May and June, the hottest part of the summer seasons. One has to execute his duty in spite of climatic inconveniences. Similarly, to fight is the religious principle of the Kshatriyas, and although one has to fight with some friend or relative, one should not deviate from his prescribed duty. One has to follow the prescribed rules and regulations of religious principles in order to rise up to the platform of knowledge, because by knowledge and devotion only can one liberate himself from the clutches of Maya, illusion. The two different names of address given to Arjuna are also significant. To address him as Kaunteya signifies his great blood relations from his mother's side, and to address him as Bharat signifies his greatness from his father's side. From both sides, he is supposed to have a great heritage. A great heritage brings responsibility in the matter of proper discharge of duties, therefore he cannot avoid fighting. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pashyatadishta. That's a prayer to my spiritual master. It says, before speaking anything, one should acknowledge one's spiritual master and present oneself as a humble servant. And the first words in the verse are matra sparsha. So sparsha means touch, and matra means the senses. So the senses touch items in this world, and by that we get some experience. And when we're, as the Bhagavatam explains, when we're in the womb of our mothers, our senses are internalized. And when we come out into the world, there's a connection between our senses and the sense objects. And this connection that we have with the outside world through this body, Krishna says later in the Bhagavad Gītā, in the 3rd chapter, next chapter, is where misery comes from. He mentions that the happiness that we get from connecting our senses to sense objects has a beginning and an end. And therefore, he says, a wise person doesn't consider that real pleasure, as it comes and it goes. Real pleasure is called ananda, and it's ever increasing. But it takes place on the platform of the soul, not on the platform of the body. And then there's this sense of how he gives this metaphor of Shita, winter, Ushna, summer. And what we think is pleasurable in the summer, like we're in summer seasons, we're able to take a bath in cool water and it feels good. But in the wintertime, you shudder to think, oh, am I going to go take a bath? Of course, this was before indoor showers and things like that. And even now, if you're walking around Vrindavan, I see sometimes, even in very cold times, it's freezing out, actually, and kind of foggy like today, but much, much colder. And I'll see people come out and take a shower in the pump. They have like a bucket and they pump the water, and they're standing out there with a cloth around their midsection, and then they'll be putting water over their head just to take their bath, because you can't skip it because it's too cold. You have to take a bath anyway. It's one of the regulations. Take a bath, be clean in body and mind. And then the example, in the summertime, it's your duty to cook. You have to do that, but it's hot and you don't feel like going to the kitchen, but you do it anyway. So although we have this idea of getting pleasure from the senses, they also bring us into situations where we feel uncomfortable. So we have to tolerate the extremes in the world. And toleration is one of the ways that Krishna recommends throughout the Bhagavad Gītā to be steady in spiritual consciousness. Don't give in to the extremes and the changes of the external world. And also notice that if you pursue the pleasure of the senses in this world, then the result of it will be, although it may feel like pleasure in the beginning, there'll be misery at the end, because you'll have to contend with the reaction to it. So we remain neutral while we're in the body, and we go on with our spiritual duty. And as one does that, there's a sense of satisfaction, which is invaluable in this world because nobody has it. It's very rare, because you can only get it from the spiritual platform. You can't get it from having money. You can't get it from having a beautiful property somewhere. You can't get it from having freedom to fly all over the world. And any of these things don't bring lasting happiness. Only if one has developed Krishna consciousness can one become happy. And it doesn't matter what the situation is externally. So although this seems to be a simple principle and a simple verse, it's one of the essential aspects of practicing spiritual life, is learning how to tolerate the dualities and to go on with one's practice in spiritual life. And the final point I'll make is that consistency is king in spiritual practice. If you're able to be consistent, even if you start with a minimal practice, but you keep it up every day and do your quota that you've decided to do, then it will have its effect. And there's an example that someone once gave about how when you make yogurt, does anybody here know how to make yogurt? You take a big pot of milk, of Well, let's just say it is a big pot, and call your life a big pot of milk. And if you take a little yogurt that's already there and you put it in the milk, even if it's a little bit, you put into the big pot of milk, and then you set the pot in a place with an even temperature, not too cold, not too hot, and you leave it overnight, a miracle happens. You come back and the whole pot turns to yogurt. So in our spiritual practice, we have a lot of things going on in our lives, but if you can add that spiritual practice to the big pot of your life, then eventually the whole pot transforms and everything about your life gets connected to Krishna consciousness. It doesn't mean you have to give up what you're doing. As the example here is Arjuna. He's a warrior, and therefore he has to fight. It's his duty. If you call somebody when you're getting attacked who's supposed to be a police officer and say, please help me, and say, oh no, sorry, I'm non-violent, I can't help you. A non-violent policeman or a violent priest are not wanted. Everyone has their duty to do. They have to do it. So we go on with whatever our duties are in life, but if we add this spiritual practice and do it consistently, then gradually everything transforms. And now let's just see if there's any reflections or questions from anything over our last couple days together. Yes.
From this verse, that in order to come to this point of functioning beyond the considerations of happiness and distress, there has to be a strong sense of duty. And generally, we don't hear about that so much in the world, at least in the Western world. We don't learn about the importance of having a duty which you continue on with despite the fact it may be pleasurable or unpleasurable. I was wondering if you could illuminate that principle of duty in order to overcome the dualities of this world.
Sure. Well, in the version of the Srimad Bhagavatam, the most important duty we have is to Krishna and to ourselves as souls. And this comes out in the very beginning of the Bhagavatam, that no matter what else you're doing, your ultimate duty is to be Krishna conscious. Otherwise, you can't be happy. And adding that element changes everything. It's like adding the yogurt to the milk. You may be expert in many ways and have many assets. And Prabhupada used to give the example that the material assets, they're like zeros, because ultimately they don't amount to anything until you put a 1 in front of them, and then they have significant value. So whatever kinds of talents or assets we have in our life remain zero until we put Krishna in front of them, we're able to use them in Krishna's service. And then there's the aspect of our lives in general, that finding steadiness in our life requires a little inventiveness. We have to look and see, what is it that I'm going to have to do to sustain my life? And we'll also have to do that. Oftentimes people come to Krishna consciousness and then they'll try to be overly renounced and give up everything for the sake of giving it up, and then realize they're not able to sustain their lifestyle. For instance, in a very successful Hare Krishna ashram in India, lots of young people had come to want to be part of the ashram and just live as full-time monks. But after some time, the leaders of the ashram said, first you finish your degree in college before you join the ashram, so that just in case you don't stay permanently, you have a place to go back and do your worldly duties to be able to maintain yourself so that you don't become disoriented and not have a way to live. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur talks about how we have these two aspects to our lives. One is called Vyavaharika, and the other is called Paramarthika. Vyavaharika means that we have to do what we need to do to earn a livelihood, as an example, and maintain ourselves. If we have others to maintain, then we have to do our duty to maintain them also. And on the other side, we have Paramarthika, which is our ultimate goal of life, and our Krishna consciousness. And the two things, as I'm describing, go together, but we do have to make sure that that we take care of both of them, and we don't neglect our Vyavaharika duties. For instance, if you're not a full-time monk living in an ashram, because if you are, and you're happy there, you're exempted from having to go out and earn a livelihood. However, living in between that and saying I'm renounced, but then living at the graces of others without being a full-time monk is a kind of no man's land. So being dutiful in the world when necessary, and also maintaining one's spiritual life. These are two duties that have to go on simultaneously. Did that answer the spirit of your question?
Yes.
Okay. Yes.
This verse talks about how the happiness and distress come from sense perception, and we know that of the senses, the mind is the most difficult one to tolerate or be ahead of, or be in try to control. We live in a busy society where our motivation comes from results. How can we teach the mind to not be so attached to results? And if it is attached to results, what to do?
One of the ways Krishna recommends in the Bhagavad Gītā is to start practicing giving some of the results that you're getting to Krishna. For instance, you might give it to those who are distributing books, Krishna conscious literature, and say, here's some of my paycheck. When you give, that's the general fruit, because we don't work for a boss, we work for money, right? Anybody here work? And if your boss calls and says, we're not going to pay you anymore, can you please still come in? You'll probably say no. So the ultimate fruit is the remuneration that we're getting from them. And if you take some of that and you designate it that I'm giving this to distribute books, you give it to some person or a group that you trust, and you say I'm investing this in helping to spread Krishna consciousness. Then what happens is you start to get some knowledge and detachment by giving away the fruit of the result of your work. And it's uncanny. It's very practical also, because there's a way in which, have you ever been in a situation where there was an opportunity to give a donation and then your mind's going back and forth thinking like, should I, shouldn't I? If I give this, then I won't have this or that. And if I do give it, then, well, I'll be doing the right thing, maybe we're thinking. And then let's just say you do give it. And one of the realizations we get right after we do that is, oh, I'm still alive. Because the mind has this idea that unless I hold on to everything, then I'll die. I have to survive in this world, and I have to protect myself, and I have to protect my happiness. And to do that, I have to fortify myself with wealth and so forth. And to a certain degree, that's true. But we also have to learn that by letting go, we can see for ourselves that we're not maintaining ourselves. Krishna's maintaining us. And oftentimes when you give, you grow, you become bigger, you have more capacity, you have a sense of perspective that you didn't have before. So Krishna advocates for this in the Bhagavad Gītā, and he said, as you're working, just start to give away some of the fruit of your work. I know a person who is very wealthy. He's a devotee. He started in the ashram in India, and he comes from a family of entrepreneurs, and he has it in his blood. So at a certain point, he asked his spiritual master, can I start a business? And he said, I'll give all the result to the temple. And after some discussion or several discussions, he did that, and he was very successful. And he sold the business, and he gave lots of money to help develop some certain projects. And then he started an organization to help other entrepreneurs. He comes to Silicon Valley, where there are lots of wealthy entrepreneurs who also have a sense of spirituality. And the last time he was there, I met with him and some of the business people who came, and he was telling them that those companies that designate a large part of their income, the companies themselves, in their bylaws, they say, we're going to give 50% of everything we make to a higher cause. He said they do better than other companies. And then he also said that when people go into business, if they say later on, once I make a lot of money, then I'll start giving some. He said they never do. And what's more, they don't do as well as the other ones. This is how he was preaching to these wealthy people. And he was just talking about the uncanny way when you become a giver and you don't hold on to everything. You actually grow and you become more successful, even in a material sense. What to speak of spiritually, you start to realize that the result isn't coming from me, and it's not mine to hold on to anyway. And this is the beginning of Krishna consciousness, to understand that actually Krishna is in control of everything and not me. So in a very practical way, we start by giving away what we can from the result of our work, and then our knowledge will grow and our detachment will grow too. And it's very practical to be able to do that. Yes.
Could you speak on like tolerance in relation to this verse, but also not being a doormat? And I don't know, when is it appropriate to have strong boundaries? When is it appropriate?
Well, if you have a duty to do, it's your responsibility to make sure that it's carried out, and others shouldn't interrupt your duty. And there will be circumstances where people try to interrupt your duties in life, you deal with it methodically but dispassionately. In other words, you have to do, tolerance doesn't mean that you tolerate the transgressions of others, although you can tolerate the minor transgressions of others. For instance, if somebody bumps into you accidentally, and when you're getting on an airplane, you don't have to turn to them and say, "Why you, Ayashayada?" You just tolerate it. If, on the other hand, somebody comes and tries to usurp your property, or steal something from you, you have every right to protect your property, because including your body, that's your property to use in Krishna's service. So it's part of your duty to protect it. At the same time, even as you do the due process, you can remain dispassionate in the sense that you do the best you can in all circumstances to do your duty, and then you depend on the result from that that comes from Krishna. And there's a verse like this in Prahlad Maharaja's prayers in the Bhagavatam, where he says that parents can't actually protect their children, doctors can't actually cure their patients, and a boat on water can't save a drowning person unless everything's in place by divine order. And what that means is that if somebody's drowning on the water, and you can do something about it, you should take the boat and try to save the person. And if you're a parent, you should try to take care of your dependents to the best of your ability. And if you're a doctor, you should try to do your due diligence and prescribe the right medicine that will help the person. But you should also be aware of that ultimately the result comes from Krishna. So in the same way, as you're doing your duty, if somebody transgresses in such a way that they try to interrupt what you're doing, then you do the best you can to keep doing your duty. For instance, if someone cheats you out of something, it's not that you just say, okay, it's gone. I mean, you can say that internally, but you can do your due diligence to a point to try to get it back. Sometimes there's inter-family squabbles over an inheritance or something like that. And if there's something to be done, you can take steps. But you keep it in mind that it will only be successful if Krishna wants it to be, and don't get overheated in the process. If it comes to a point where it looks like there's nothing I can do about this, it's gone, I've done my due diligence up to a point, and you say, okay, and now I leave it. So it's, in a practical way, we do what we can, but we depend on Krishna. So we don't become just doormats and let people assault us in different ways, because it's your duty to protect yourself. So one way you frame it is if you're doing it in Krishna's service, then it becomes non-reactive. And if you're doing it because on a level of false ego, you're doing it for yourself. Even if you're protecting your reputation, but it's for Krishna. For instance, Prabhupada was the head of an organization, and although he didn't need any title, he accepted a title to hold forth in the organization, or there has to be a nucleus. Somebody has to be called the founder, Acharya. And someone would say, well, why don't you just be a leader without a title? It's because somebody else will come in and claim that space if you don't. And people tried to, actually. When Prabhupada started the movement, there were people from other sectors who came in and said, no, this movement doesn't actually belong to you. It doesn't belong to everyone, but I'll take over from here. And Prabhupada said, no, I have to hold space here. So he protected his title, and he said, I'm to be called the founder Acharya and the center of the organization, so that it doesn't fall apart, because he had seen it happen in other organizations. And someone might say, well, what kind of thing is that? Isn't that something from the ego that you want a title? No, because he was doing it in service for Krishna. So the ultimate test is, are you doing it to serve and continue your service to Krishna, or are you doing it because of your own sense of false ego? Does that help?
How can we tell the difference between false ego and the soul? Sometimes I don't know.
One is to ask the question, ask yourself, am I doing this for service, or am I doing it for myself? And the other way is, if you have good spiritual mentorship, which is always important to remain objective, because oftentimes it's hard for us to tell ourselves. We may say, I don't know, maybe this is service and maybe it is my own false ego. And if you have those who are objective and they're your well-wishers, that's why Gaudiya Vaishnavism is a team sport. We try to surround ourselves with those who are really our well-wishers and who don't have a sense of trying to exploit us. They just want to help. And if you have such mentors, you can go to them and say, I'm in this situation, what's my duty? And so that'll happen more often than not, because sometimes it's hard to tell what's our duty and what's not our duty and what's best. So good to have that. And then, of course, there's this way of triangulating called guru, sadhu, and shastra. So guru means if you have a primary spiritual authority who you're following and can help you, because there has to be a last opinion somewhere. Like people say about the Supreme Court, that it's not, they're not the ultimate, how does it go? They're the ultimate decision maker because they're last. I forget how the juxtaposition goes, but you have to have somebody at the end who says, okay, this is it. And you can compare that to what other advanced spiritual people have said in the past and are saying now, and also what's there in the Shastra, like the Bhagavad Gītā and Srimad Bhagavatam. Life's complicated because we have these multi-layers in our life. We're spiritual souls, but we're ensconced in a material body, so it's important to have ways in which we can, through the different periods of our life, discern through consultation with these entities what's the best thing for me to do at this particular time. Especially in times of transition, it gets difficult, because transition is a time when we think, oh, is this the right time to do this? And am I doing the right thing? And then it's good to take help. Any last points? Yes.
Is there any way we can, when going through like happiness or distress, especially distress in a more practical way, like apply that back to service towards Krishna? Or like when you're going through distress, you often forget the bigger goal and you feel a lot of pain, right? So how do you practically relate it back to Krishna in that moment?
Oftentimes, as we were discussing some of the other talks, we get an opportunity to, in times of distress, just as Arjuna is here. In fact, the first chapter is called the Yoga of Despair. So he's definitely in distress. And if we can come, the result of that distress is to offer it to Krishna and say, Krishna, I don't know what to do. Arjuna comes to that point. That's the beginning of the instruction of the Bhagavad Gītā. If he just kept, for lack of a better term, whining, as he does in the first chapter, he's very concerned and he's saying, well, what about this? What about that? And I have to, organize this. And he realizes it's a lose-lose proposition the way he's looking at it. No matter what he does, it's going to go wrong. And then he comes to the point of saying, I honestly don't know what to do. That's a nice breakthrough point. And then he turns to Krishna and he says, I have no idea what my duty is here. Please tell me. So when we're in distress, it can bring us to that point of saying, Krishna, I'm offering this to you. I don't know what to do. And in one of his writings, Prabhupada says, we should pray like that. We should admit to Krishna how we're being tossed by the material ocean and saying, Krishna, I'm getting thrashed out here. Little help, like I'm here getting pounded. What am I supposed to do, Krishna? These are the existential questions and points in our life when we feel crushed. And sometimes those can be the most productive because we're at a point where we give up. Just say, Krishna, please help me. Tell me what to do. So in times of stress, that can be very helpful. And that's the ultimate solution to that. I was in a management situation once where I was really perplexed because there was a situation that was way beyond my control, and then it blew up into lawsuit, and then there was a question about whether there was enough insurance to cover the lawsuit, and I was thinking, oh, what a disaster, and everything will be lost, and it's going to lead to all kinds of bad consequences. And I went to consult some of my godbrothers senior godbrothers, and I told them the whole situation. And they couldn't exactly fix it. They just sort of acknowledged it. And I maybe felt about 2% better after talking to them. Like, okay, at least I told somebody. But then a few days later, one of them had written me an email and sent me a verse from the 4th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, in which Maharaj Prithu had been in a really awkward situation. He was trying to do a special ceremony, and it was a very elaborate ceremony, and it required a horse. And Indra, who had done 100 of such ceremonies, got envious because this king was going to do his 100th, and Indra wouldn't be the only one who had done 100 of them. And so Indra came disguised as a monk, and he kept stealing the horse to try to ruin the yajna. And after it had happened several times, King Prithu became so disturbed that he wanted to kill Indra. And then the priest there said, "You can't kill him, we'll kill him." And they were going to do an incantation that would draw Indra into the sacrificial fire. And then Brahma, who's the administrator of the universe, he came and he said, "Wait a minute, you can't kill Indra, none of you can. Let's talk about this." And he gave this advice that when things happen by destiny, then you shouldn't take it very personally. You should just understand that this is the way the material world works. Eventually everything goes sideways here in the world, no matter how good it looks now. And when he sent me that verse, and Prabhupada had said in the purport, sometimes you just have to tolerate these things, then I actually got about 96% plus the 2, put it at 98% relief. I still had to deal with the situation, but I was able to come to a position of, okay, this is very directly related to my situation, this kind of disastrous situation that seems to have no solution, and I leave it to Krishna. I'm going to do the best I can with it. So when we're in distress and we have this pain, we can offer it to Krishna and say, I don't know how this happened, but I'm going to just wait for you to show me how to deal with it, and then move forward with your life. And it very much helps if you have your spiritual practice, so you can take refuge there. Because if you have your daily japa, it's a place where when you're going through things in your life, whether up or down, because they're the same coin, different sides, everything becomes justified and evened out by the taking shelter of the chanting process. Your mind becomes spiritualized, and you go, okay, whatever happens on that plane, I'll deal with it methodically, but you have the wherewithal from your chanting every day to deal with it dispassionately and not becoming overcome. There's a saying that I like that relates to this, which is, nothing is ever as good as it seems or as bad as it seems. The mind tends to spike. When something good happens, say, well, I'm the smartest person in the world, and now I'm wealthy for the rest of my life, or whatever happens. Is like, no, there's going to be some taxes to pay on that, and who knows what else is going to happen because of the so-called good. And if the bad happens, then it's like, no, it's not as bad as it seems either. Well, we had a good few days, and once you invest in spiritual life, then the damage to the material world is done and it can't be taken back. So congratulations to everybody. It takes a lot of effort to set up a yajna. A yajna means a time in which you can fully dedicate your consciousness to Krishna. It takes some major effort to take it down again. And the interim time is sometimes a lot smaller. It's kind of like those, there's some nuts that have a really big shell, and inside there's a tiny little fruit inside. But it's so worth it. And it's where we get our real traction in life, is taking the time and trouble to set up this yajna. So to all who contributed to making sure that this last few days could happen, just Sri Antariksha Aparagarangi, we have Radha Kripa Prabhu, Krishnangi Gopi, came all the way here, Halayuta Kripa, they all conspired to do major service behind, and Satya Sankalpa Prabhu is on his way. He's here already doing service. And these kinds of servants, they're selfless. They just come and do all the backup work so the yajna can happen. We thank you very, very much from the bottom of our hearts for making this possible and making such a huge sacrifice. Thank you. And we thank both of you for making sure that San Luis Obispo is a place of yajna. As Apara Gaurangi suggested this morning, as she had driven past here once on her way to Los Angeles and realized it's a place where the early missionaries had set up a spot, she was praying as she drove past here some time ago that this could be a place of Krishna consciousness. So you've both done that in such an amazing way, so that there's a yajna going on here constantly, and it's one of the most amazing spots of yajna that I've seen in a long time. And I thank you both very much. Hare Krishna. And your whole team. And to Dr. Brian. You just see how one person can shift into a higher realm from the determination I've noticed in you that, it becomes obvious, self-evident when you give of yourself so deeply to make facility for Krishna consciousness to take place, giving your house. Reminds me of Srivas Thakur, who during Lord Chaitanya's time, he just signed over his whole house to Lord Chaitanya and said, you can use it any time. And he did. They were there every day having a huge kirtan all night long. And it's notable service that you're doing. And we pray that Lord Chaitanya, Srila Prabhupada, and all the great acharyas empower you more and more to do this work of spreading Krishna consciousness. Hare Krishna. Thank you, everyone, for this amazing few days. I was trying to say weekend, but it's not even I guess we're into it now. But it's a time I'll never forget. Just having the opportunity to be here and be part of this yajna has been life-changing. And all of you that are practicing Krishna consciousness, whether just beginning or you've been doing it for some time, the main teachings have already been given to us by Srila Prabhupada in such a way that we can take them up from any position and be fully successful in this lifetime. So just take the core practices to heart. As Bhaktivinoda Thakur once said, take the simple practice the simple path strictly. Just because it's simple and there's only a couple of major important parts to it doesn't mean to do it haphazardly, but it just means take the very simple points that are most effective and then give full attention to them, and all good things will come from that. I've been through various phases of my life since I joined the Krishna Consciousness movement in 1973, and now I find myself going on 50 years, and it only seems like 5 minutes to me. But because somehow or other by the good graces of the people I've been fortunate to associate with, the devotees who have dragged me along, there's an accumulation that takes place and it's permanent. So no matter what situation you're in now, keep accumulating. Human life is meant to accumulate this special asset of Krishna consciousness. Every molecule that you get is extremely valuable, and it all adds up with compounded interest. So whatever you can do, just keep doing it. And in the beginning, start by using your intelligence, because if you think carefully about what's important in life, you can come to a conclusion that it's not following the status quo. There has to be something more than that. And if you take help from the great spiritual intellects of the previous acharyas and of Krishna himself through the Bhagavad Gītā and Srimad Bhagavatam, then you'll always feel encouraged. So I recommend read the Bhagavad Gītā and the Srimad Bhagavatam and others of Prabhupada's books every day, because it'll keep your intelligence informed, so that despite whatever happens in your life and whatever changes you're going through, you'll still have spiritual intelligence to know that it's important to keep your spiritual practice going in all circumstances. And whenever you get an opportunity, when it opens up to do more, don't hesitate to lean in, because life is very short, and any time that you're taking a little risk to say, I'll do more Krishna consciousness and absorb myself more, then you can put more in your spiritual bank account, and those full immersion experiences are invaluable and can give you a taste that you'll keep for the rest of your life. Om Tat Sat. Any other last points? Oh, right. How many? Okay. Yeah, I mentioned the Srimad Bhagavatam, and I highly recommend that you keep the set of Bhagavatams in your living space, because when you have it there, it'll call to you. What's more, it says in the ancient Vedic literatures that anyone who keeps Vaishnava literature in their house and respects it, their house is worshipped by the demigods. It's kind of like red. They look down here and they can see the apartments and homes where the Bhagavatam is. It's got a little glow coming from it. So if you don't have a Bhagavatam set, then we can provide you with one, and we can put it in your apartment. Then the demigods will look down and do a little artik to your house. Does anybody not have a Bhagavatam set? I should probably tell the conditions behind receiving one. Does everyone here have one or not? You raise your hand, and the consequences of raising your hand are as follows. We'll say it in the passive voice. You will receive a Bhagavatam set. If they want to give something in return, they can.
If they want to, they can reciprocate according to their capacity.
According to capacity. You can give anything in return. It doesn't, and if you don't have capacity, it's okay also. Just keep it nicely and read it. But we have a few sets available for those who don't yet have a set of Bhagavatams. So everybody close your eyes. And if you don't have a Bhagavatam set, but you'd like to have one, raise your hand, and nobody look, because I'll come and check in with you. If you don't have a Bhagavatam set, raise your hand. Okay, you can put your hands down, all of you, and open your eyes. And we will give you a Bhagavatam set, Caesar. Thanks to Svarna Bindu Prabhu and Devavrata Prabhu for making it happen. Thank you. Hare Krishna. Dear Srila Prabhupada, dear Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Shri Panchatattva, if you so desire, please empower everybody in San Luis Obispo, the Krishna consciousness movement, to always have a steady daily practice of japa and reading of Srila Prabhupada's books. Thank you for considering my request. Om Tat Sat. Everyone agrees with this prayer in whole or in part. Please unmute and say Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Now I say a prayer where we say that devotees are like desire trees. They're there to fulfill the desires of everyone. It goes like this. Vancha kalpatarubhyascha kripasinabhevacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namana. Vancha means desire and kalpa means tree. So there are trees in Vrindavan that if you sit under them, they'll fulfill any of your desires. But the devotees are like walking desire trees. If you get around them, they'll fulfill all your desires also. Thanks, everyone. Hare Krishna.